The electromagnetic storm hit Vareth 7 without warning, and the sky turned a violent shade of purple as lightning carved paths through the clouds above the small human. Colony Dr. Yoon Sira stood at the window of her tiny clinic, watching the chaos unfold outside as the wind howled and shook the metal walls of every building in the settlement. "Everyone, get inside now." Colony leader Baek Junho's voice crackled through the emergency speakers, and the few colonists still outside ran for shelter as debris flew through the air like weapons. Sira turned away from the window and checked her medical supplies for the third time that hour, knowing that storms like this always brought injuries and emergencies that would test her limited resources. The colony on Vareth 7 was small and largely forgotten by the rest of humanity. A frontier outpost of barely 200 people who had chosen to build their lives on a harsh and unforgiving world. Sira had been here for 3 years now, and she had learned to treat every kind of wound with whatever tool she had available. From broken bones to radiation burns to animal attacks, the storm raged for hours, and Sira was preparing to sleep on the cot in her clinic when her emergency scanner beeped with an alert that made her blood run cold. There was a life sign outside the colony walls, and it was fading fast. "That cannot be right," she whispered to herself as she grabbed her emergency kit and pulled on her protective gear without hesitation. The other colonists would call her foolish for going out in this weather, but Sira had never been able to ignore someone in need. And she was not about to start now. She fought her way through the storm, the wind pushing against her so hard that every step felt like a battle she might lose. The scanner led her to a small ravine near the eastern perimeter, and what she found there made her stop and stare in shock. A woman lay crumpled against the rocks. But she was not human. Her skin was silver and seemed to shimmer even in the dim light of the storm, and her features were sharp and elegant in a way that reminded Sira of ancient statues she had seen in history books. Blood pooled beneath her body, dark purple against the gray stones, and her wounds looked like they came from blades and energy weapons rather than any accident. "Can you hear me?" Sira knelt beside the stranger and checked her vital signs with trembling hands, unsure if her human medical knowledge would even apply to this alien biology. The woman's eyes fluttered open for just a moment, revealing irises that glowed like molten gold, and she whispered something in a language Sira did not understand before losing consciousness again. "Okay, I am going to help you," Sira said firmly as she began applying pressure to the worst of the wounds. "Just hold on and let me do my job." Getting the alien woman back to the clinic was the hardest thing Sira had ever done, but somehow she managed to drag her through the storm and into the safety of the medical bay old Mr. Go from the supply depot saw her struggling and ran to help despite the danger, and together they lifted the stranger onto the examination table. "What in the stars is that?" Mr. Go asked with wide eyes as he looked at their patient. "She is someone who needs help," Sira answered without looking up from her work. "That is all that matters right now." Mr. Go shook his head but did not argue, and he left Sira alone to do what she did best. The next several hours were a blur of improvisation and desperate measures as Sira worked to save a life she did not understand. The alien woman's biology was different from humans in many ways, but the basics were similar enough that Sira could adapt her techniques and tools to the situation. She cleaned the wounds and sealed them with medical adhesive that she hoped would work on silver skin. She administered fluids and monitored vital signs that she could only guess the meaning of. She stitched and bandaged and did everything her training had taught her to do, refusing to give up even when the situation seemed hopeless. As dawn approached and the storm finally began to fade, Sira sat exhausted beside her patient and watched the steady rise and fall of the woman's chest. "You are going to live," she said softly, more to convince herself than anything else. "I did not fight through that storm just to lose you now." It was then that Sira noticed the scars beneath the fresh wounds were older marks. patterns that looked too deliberate to be accidents, and they covered the woman's arms and shoulders like a map of violence and survival. These were not scars from misfortune or disease. These were the marks of a warrior. Someone who had faced combat many times and lived to carry the proof on her body. Sierra leaned back in her chair and studied the sleeping stranger with new eyes, wondering who this woman was and what kind of life had brought her wounded and alone to this forgotten corner of the galaxy. "What happened to you?" she whispered into the quiet of the clinic. Knowing she would get no answer, yet the alien woman slept on, her silver skin slowly regaining its luster as her body healed. And Sierra kept watch through the night like a guardian over a mystery she did not yet understand. Outside, the storm passed and the twin suns of Earth 7 began to rise, casting golden light over a colony that had no idea their lives were about to change forever. Sierra did not know that the woman on her table was the deadliest warrior in the galaxy. She did not know that empires trembled at the mention of her name. She only knew that someone had been hurt and alone, and that she had done what any decent person would do. She had helped, and that simple act of kindness would echo across the stars in ways she could never have imagined. The stranger woke on the third day with a violent start, her hand shooting toward her hip where a weapon should have been. It was not. Sierra had been checking the bandages when it happened, and she found herself suddenly pinned against the wall by a grip stronger than anything she had ever felt. Golden eyes burned into hers with predatory intensity. And for one terrible moment, Sierra was certain she was about to die. "Where am I?" the alien woman demanded in heavily accented but understandable human speech. "Who are you and what have you done to me?" "My name is Dr. Yoon Sierra," she answered as calmly as she could manage with her feet barely touching the floor. "I am a healer, and I saved your life 3 days ago when I found you dying in a storm." The golden eyes searched her face for any sign of deception, and Sierra forced herself to meet that terrifying gaze without flinching. After a long moment, the grip loosened and Sierra dropped to her feet as the stranger stepped back with an expression of confusion. "You saved me?" she asked as if the concept was foreign to her. "Why would you do such a thing when you do not know who I am?" Sierra rubbed her throat and took a steadying breath before answering with the only truth she knew. "You were hurt, and you needed help. And I help people who are hurt because that is what healers do." The alien woman stared at her in silence, and Sierra could see the wheels turning behind those golden eyes as she tried to understand this strange human logic. "I'm called Valith," the stranger finally said, and her posture shifted from aggressive to merely guarded. "I owe you a debt that my people take very seriously." "You do not owe me anything," Sierra replied as she moved to prepare food and medicine for her patient. "Just rest and let your body heal, and we can talk about debts later if you insist." Over the next several days, Valith recovered her strength under Sierra's careful attention, and the clinic became a place of quiet observation and growing curiosity. Sierra noticed that Valith watched everything with the sharp eyes of a predator assessing her environment. From the way the colonists moved through the Yonde settlement to the supplies on the medical shelves, she asked questions that seemed strange to Sierra. Questions about why humans shared food with those who could not hunt and why children were protected even when they provided no value to the group. "Your colony is small and your resources are limited," Valith observed one evening as Sierra changed her bandages. "Yet you waste medicine on the old and the sick who cannot contribute to your survival." "We do not see it as waste," Sierra answered patiently as she worked. "We see it as taking care of our family because everyone in this colony matters to us. Even the weak? Especially the weak, because strength means nothing if we abandon each other when times get hard." Valith fell silent at this, and Sierra could see that her words had struck something deep within the alien woman's understanding of the universe. Later that week, Sierra took Valith outside for the first time since her arrival, and the silver-skinned stranger stood in the sunlight of Vareth 7 watching the colonists go about. Their daily lives, children played in the dust between the buildings, while their parents worked and laughed and called out greetings to each other. Across the settlement, old Mr. Go sat on a bench teaching a young boy how to repair a broken tool. And nearby, a group of workers shared their lunch with a man who had forgotten to bring his own. "This is how your kind lives?" Valeth asked with something like wonder in her voice. "You share and protect and care for each other without hierarchy or dominance?" "We have leaders and we have roles," Sira explained as she stood beside her patient. "But we believe that everyone deserves dignity and kindness regardless of their strength or status. Among my people, such philosophy would be seen as weakness to be exploited. And yet here you are, alive, because a weak human chose to help a strong warrior she found dying in a storm." Valeth turned to look at Sira with an expression that might have been respect or confusion or both. "You are not weak, Duryun Sira, and I am beginning to think that your people are not either." That night, Sira was woken by a frantic knocking on her clinic door, and she opened it to find colony leader Junho with a grim expression on his weathered face. "We have a problem," he said without preamble. "Our long-range sensors just picked up 3 ships entering orbit, and they are not human." Sira felt her stomach drop as she glanced back at Valeth, who had risen from her bed with an alertness that spoke of a lifetime of combat readiness. "They are here for me," Valeth said quietly, and there was something like resignation in her golden eyes. "I should have known they would track me here eventually. Who is they?" Junho demanded as he looked between the 2 women. "What exactly have we gotten ourselves into here?" "Enemies," Valeth answered simply. "Enemies who will destroy your entire colony to get to me without hesitation or mercy." The room fell silent as the weight of her words settled over them like a shroud. Sira looked at this woman she had saved, this warrior with scars like a map of violence, and she made a decision that would define the rest of her life. "Then we need to hide you," she said firmly. "And we need a plan." Junho stared at her like she had lost her mind. "You want to protect her against ships that could glass this entire colony from orbit. She came to us wounded and alone, and that makes her ours to protect whether she likes it or not." Valeth's golden eyes widened with something Sira had never seen in them before. It looked almost like hope. The 3 warships descended through the morning sky like metal predators, and every colonist on Vareth 7 stopped what they were doing to watch the massive vessels land beyond the settlements. Eastern perimeter, Sira stood at the window of her clinic with her heart pounding against her ribs as she watched soldiers begin pouring out of the ships in organized formations. They were the same species as Valeth, with silver skin and tall, elegant frames, but they moved with the cold precision of killers who had done this many times before. "Volanti Dominion soldiers," Valeth said from behind her, her voice flat and hard. "Some of the most feared warriors in the galaxy, and they answer to the one who hunts me." "How many?" Sira asked without turning from the window. "At least 200 from what I can see. And there will be more on the ships waiting for orders." Junho's voice crackled through Sira's communicator with barely controlled tension. "They are demanding to speak with our leader, and they say they are looking for a fugitive who may be hiding among us." "Tell them you know nothing," Sira replied quickly. "Buy us time to figure out what to do next." "And what exactly is our plan here, Doctor?" Junho asked with a hint of desperation in his voice. "We have farming equipment and medical supplies against warships and professional soldiers. I'm working on that. Just keep them talking." Sira turned to face Valeth, who stood fully dressed in borrowed human clothes, with her wounds still bandaged beneath the fabric. "You need to hide in the basement storage room behind the supply crates," Sira instructed as she moved to clear a path. "I will seal the door, and no one will know you are there." "This is foolishness," Valeth argued even as she followed Sira toward the hidden room. These soldiers will tear your colony apart, looking for me. And when they find me, they will kill everyone who helped conceal my presence. Then, we will make sure they do not find you. You do not understand what you are facing. Dear Sira. Sira stopped and turned to face the alien warrior with fire in her eyes. I understand that you are wounded and outnumbered, and that people are coming to hurt you. I understand that my people do not abandon those who need our protection. Why? Valeth demanded with frustration, cracking her composure. Why would you risk everything for a stranger you found in a storm? Because that is who we are, Sira answered simply. Now get in the basement and stay quiet no matter what you hear. Valeth stared at her for a long moment, and something shifted in those golden eyes that Sira could not quite name. Then the warrior did as she was told, disappearing into the hidden room as Sira sealed the door behind her outside. The situation was deteriorating rapidly as a tall, silver-skinned commander strode into the center of the colony with an escort of armed soldiers. Junho stood before him with his hands raised in a gesture of peace, surrounded by frightened colonists who had gathered to witness the confrontation. I am Warlord Kethril of the Volanthi Dominion, the commander announced in a voice that carried across the entire settlement. And I am hunting a dangerous criminal who crash-landed on this planet 7 days ago. We are a peaceful colony with no involvement in galactic politics, Junho replied carefully. We know nothing of any criminal or any crash. Kethril's eyes swept over the gathered humans with open contempt, and his lip curled in a sneer that made Sira's blood run cold. These primitive creatures could not possibly have captured or killed her, so she must be hiding among them like a coward. He gestured to his soldiers, and they began moving through the colony in pairs, kicking open doors and dragging colonists from their homes for questioning. Sira watched from her clinic window as her neighbors were shoved to their knees and interrogated at weapon point. Old Mr. Go was thrown to the ground when he could not answer quickly enough, and a young mother screamed as soldiers tore her children from her arms to search her home. Every instinct in Sira's body screamed at her to run outside and stop this madness, but she knew that revealing herself would only make things worse. They are searching every building, Junho reported through the communicator, his voice strained with helpless anger. It is only a matter of time before they reach the clinic. Sira looked toward the basement door where Valeth was hidden and felt the weight of impossible choices pressing down on her shoulders. A commotion outside drew her attention back to the window, and she saw Kethril holding Junho by the throat with one hand while his soldiers kept their weapons trained on the surrounding colonists. I grow tired of these games, the warlord snarled. Tell me where she is hiding, or I will begin executing your people one by one until someone decides to talk. The colonists looked at each other with terror in their eyes, and Sira knew that someone would break under this pressure. Eventually, she was reaching for the basement door to tell Valeth to surrender, when she heard movement behind her. Valeth had already opened the door from the inside, and she stood there with bandages still wrapped around her torso and fire burning in her golden eyes. Give me a weapon, she said quietly. It is time I stopped hiding behind the courage of humans. You are not fully healed yet, Sira protested. Your wounds could tear open if you fight. Then I will bleed while I kill them. But I will not let your people die for me any longer. Sira looked at this woman who had arrived as a mystery and become something like a friend, and she made one final desperate plea. There has to be another way. There is not, Valeth replied with something almost gentle in her voice. But I want you to know that what you did for me will never be forgotten. She held out her hand. A weapon, Dr. Sira. If you please. Sira reached under her desk and pulled out the emergency pistol she had hoped she would never need to use. It was a human weapon, small and weak compared to the rifles the soldiers carried outside, but she placed it in Valeth's hand anyway. because she understood that some battles could not be avoided, only faced with whatever courage you could find. Velith walked out of the clinic with Sarah's small pistol held loosely at her side. And the effect on the Volanthi soldiers was immediate and dramatic. Every silver-skinned warrior in the colony froze as if struck by lightning, and Warlord Cathrol dropped Junho to the ground as his face twisted with shock and something that looked almost like fear. Impossible, he breathed as Velith strode toward him through the stunned silence. You should be dead from the wounds my assassins gave you. Your assassins were skilled, Velith replied in a voice that carried across the entire colony. But they made the mistake of leaving me alive. And I found shelter among people who know how to heal more than just bodies. Sira watched from the clinic doorway as the soldiers began to whisper among themselves. And she caught fragments of words that made no sense to her, words like Empress and Sovan and the Undefeated. Cathrol recovered his composure and spread his arms wide with a mocking smile. So the great Velith Sovan, Empress of the Volanthi Dominion, has been reduced to hiding among primitive humans in a forgotten corner of space. Empress, the word hit Sarah like a physical blow, and she looked at the woman she had been treating for over a week with new understanding. Flooding through her mind, this was no ordinary warrior or noble refugee. This was the supreme ruler of one of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. And she had been sleeping in Sarah's clinic, eating rehydrated soup and asking questions about human philosophy. I was not hiding, Velith corrected him with cold dignity. I was recovering my strength so I could deal with traitors like you properly. You are wounded and alone against 200 of my finest soldiers. Cathrol laughed. Even the legendary Velith Servan cannot defeat those odds. Perhaps not, Velith admitted as she raised the small human pistol. But I can certainly kill you before they kill me. And that will have to be enough. What happened next would be told in stories across the galaxy for generations to come. Velith moved like nothing Sira had ever seen. A blur of silver and violence that seemed to exist in a different flow of time than everything around her. The first 3 soldiers died before anyone could react, their weapons still rising as Velith's pistol spoke 3 times in rapid succession. Then she was among them with bare hands and stolen blades. A whirlwind of death that cut through. Trained warriors like they were children playing at combat. Sarah watched in horrified awe as the woman she had nursed back to health revealed herself to be exactly what the whispers claimed, the deadliest warrior in the galaxy. But even legends have limits. And Velith was fighting through pain that would have crippled any normal being. Sira saw in the moment when one of her bandages tore loose and purple blood began flowing down her silver arm. She saw Velith stumble, just slightly, as her wounded body finally began to fail her. Cathrol saw it too, and he pressed forward with a blade that hummed with deadly energy. You are weak, Empress, he taunted as he drove her back toward the colony buildings. Your time is over, and mine has finally come. That was when Junho made his move. The colony leader had been quietly organizing the colonists during the chaos of battle. And now they struck with the desperate courage of people protecting their home. They did not have weapons that could match Volanthi technology. But they had something better. They had knowledge of their own territory. Colonists pulled hidden cables and sent soldiers tumbling into trenches they had forgotten were there. Others activated emergency systems that filled the air with blinding steam. From the water recyclers, Mystigo drove a cargo loader straight into a group of soldiers, scattering them like toys while laughing with reckless abandon. It was chaos. Beautiful human chaos that the Volanthi training had never prepared them to face. What are they doing? Cathrol screamed as his organized formation dissolved into confusion around him. They are just farmers and workers. They are protecting their own, Velith replied as she found new strength in the courage of these strange, fragile humans. something you would never understand. Their blades met with a crash that echoed across the colony. And Sarah knew she should run, but found herself moving forward. Instead, a wounded colonist lay in the open between the fighters. And Sarah ran to drag him to safety, without thinking about the danger. Kethril saw her, and his eyes lit with cruel opportunity. He broke away from Valith and lunged towards Sarah with his blade raised, clearly intending to use her as a hostage or simply cut her down to hurt the Empress, who had befriended her. Time seemed to slow as Sarah looked up at the death coming toward her. Then Valith was there, moving faster than she had any right to move, with her wounds torn open and her blood painting the ground beneath her feet. She caught Kethril's blade with her bare hand, letting it cut deep into her palm as she used his own momentum to pull him off balance. Her other hand found his throat, and she squeezed with the strength of an Empress defending something she had only just learned to value. "You should not have threatened her," Valith said quietly as the light faded from Kethril's eyes. "She's under my protection." The warlord's body fell to the ground, and suddenly the battle was over. The remaining Volanti soldiers looked at their dead commander, then at the bleeding Empress who had killed him, and they made the only sensible choice available. They ran. They ran to their ships and fled into the sky, leaving behind their dead and their dreams of conquest. Valith stood alone in the center of the colony, surrounded by the bodies of her enemies and the stunned faces of the humans who had fought beside her. Then her legs gave out and she collapsed, and Sarah was there to catch her before she hit the ground. "I have you," Sarah said softly as she held the Empress of the Volanti Dominion in her arms. "I have you, and you are safe now. Your people," Valith whispered through the pain. "Are they hurt?" "Some injuries, but no deaths, thanks to you." Something like a smile crossed Valith's silver face. "Thanks to us both, I think." Then she lost consciousness, and Sarah began the familiar work of healing her once again. The colony of Varith 7 stood battered, but unbroken in the aftermath of battle, and its people moved through the wreckage with the quiet determination of survivors who had faced the impossible. And one Sarah worked through the night treating wounds and setting bones, her clinic filled with colonists who had never expected to become warriors but had risen to the challenge when their home was threatened. Valith lay on the same table where Sarah had first saved her life, unconscious once again, but stable under the doctor's careful attention. This time, her wounds were deeper and her blood loss more severe. But Sarah refused to let the universe take back what she had worked so hard to preserve on the third day after the battle. Valith finally opened her golden eyes. "You saved me again," she said quietly as she looked up at Sarah's tired face. "You saved us first," Sarah replied with a weary smile. "I think we are even now." Valith sat up slowly, testing her mended body with the careful movements of someone who had been wounded many times before. "I need to address your people," she said. "They deserve to know the truth about who I am and what their courage has meant." Sarah helped her stand, and together they walked out into the sunlight where the colonists had gathered to see their mysterious guest. Junho stood at the front of the crowd with his arm in a sling, and beside him, Mr. Goem nursed a spectacular black eye that he wore like a badge of honor. "People of Varith 7, Valith announced in a voice that carried across the settlement, "I owe you a truth and a debt that I can never fully repay." She drew herself up to her full height, and even in borrowed human clothes with bandages visible beneath the fabric, she radiated an authority that made the colonists stand straighter. "I am Valith Sorvan, Empress of the Volanti Dominion, supreme ruler of 300 worlds and commander of the largest fleet in the known galaxy." The colonists exchanged stunned glances, and Sarah heard whispered conversations breaking out as people tried to process this revelation. "I was ambushed by traitors during a secret diplomatic mission," Valith continued, "and I would have died in the storm on your planet if not for the compassion of Dr. Yoon Sarah, who dragged me from the mud and healed my wounds without asking anything in return. She turned to look at Sarah with something soft in her golden eyes. When my enemies came for me, your people had every reason to surrender me and save themselves. But instead they chose to fight beside a stranger because she had come to them wounded and alone. Jinho stepped forward with a slight bow of his head. We protect our own, Your Majesty. And anyone who sleeps under our roof becomes our own whether they want to or not. I am beginning to understand that about your species. Valeth replied with what might have been a smile. And I am beginning to think the galaxy has badly underestimated what humanity is capable of. She raised her voice so everyone could hear. From this day forward, the colony of Varus 7 is under the personal protection of the Volanthi Empress. And any who threaten this world or its people will face the full might of my empire. A cheer went up from the colonists, and Sierra felt tears prickling at her eyes as she watched her neighbors celebrate their impossible victory. Later that day, a Volanthi diplomatic vessel arrived in response to Violet's emergency beacon, and the Empress prepared to return to her duties among the stars. But first, she found Sarah alone in the clinic, organizing supplies as if nothing extraordinary had happened. I would offer you a position at my side, Valeth said from the doorway. The title of Imperial Physician carries great honor and power in my court. Sierra turned to face her with a gentle shake of her head. My place is here with my people, treating their cuts and coughs and helping their children into the world. I thought you would say that, Valeth admitted. You are stubborn in ways that remind me why I should never underestimate humans. And you are welcome back any time you need someone to patch you up and lecture you about resting properly. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Two women from different worlds who had found an unlikely connection in a storm. Your people taught me something my empire forgot long ago, Valeth finally said. That true strength is not measured in ships or soldiers or worlds conquered, but in the choice to protect those who cannot protect themselves. We just call it being decent. Sierra replied with a shrug. Perhaps that is the most dangerous thing about humanity after all. The way you make the extraordinary seem ordinary. Valeth reached out and clasped Sierra's hand in the warrior's grip. She had learned was a sign of deep respect among the Volanthi. Goodbye. Dr. Yun Sierra, and know that you have made a friend who will never forget what you did. Goodbye. Your Majesty, and try not to get stabbed by any more assassins if you can help it. Valeth laughed, a sound that surprised them both, and then she was gone 6 months later. Varus 7 was unrecognizable supply ships arrived weekly with advanced medical equipment, agricultural technology, and defensive systems that would protect the colony from any threat. A permanent diplomatic envoy established an embassy at the edge of the settlement. And suddenly the forgotten frontier world was on every star chart in the VA. Galaxy colonists who had once struggled to survive now found themselves hosting delegations from a dozen species who wanted to meet the humans who had sheltered an Empress. And Sierra continued her work in the clinic, treating patients and training young doctors while the galaxy buzzed with stories of human courage. One evening a message arrived on her personal terminal, encrypted with codes that could only have come from the highest levels of the Volanthi government. She opened it to find a simple note and a video of the Volanthi Imperial Court. The video showed Valeth addressing her council, announcing new policies that would transform her empire. Care for wounded soldiers, regardless of their ability to return to battle. Protection for civilians in conquered territories. Resources dedicated to healing rather than only destruction. The note beneath. The video was short, but it made Sarah's heart swell with pride. You healed more than my wounds, Dr. Yun Sierra. And you reminded me what I fight for, not conquest or glory, but the chance to build something worth protecting. I carry your lessons with me always, and I hope I am making you proud. Sierra read the message 3 times before closing it, and she looked out her window at the colony that had become so much more than anyone had ever imagined, somewhere out there among the stars. An Empress was changing the galaxy, and it had all started with a human doctor who found a stranger in a storm and decided to help, because that was what humans did. They helped, and sometimes that simple choice could shake the foundations of empires.